right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. I'm your host, Kiley Como. Again, I'm the legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law, and I'm pleased to continue my conversation with Dr. Joshua Wheeler. If you weren't with us on our first episode, Dr. Wheeler is known for his patient-centered approach at Lookout Valley Chiropractic in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Dr. Wheeler and his team care for children, adults, and even pets to promote healing after injuries, whether from accidents, sports, or just day-to-day life. In this episode, Dr. Wheeler is going to discuss natural strategies that may help to expedite recovery from a TBI or a concussion. He'll also share some practical advice for those seeking care and navigating the legal and insurance aspects of injury recovery, drawing on his experience with a wide range of patients. All right, Dr. Wheeler, it's great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks again for having me. Always an honor, and it's always fun to just chat about these topics for a good 20 minutes.
Yeah, I could do this all the time. I tend to get lost in the time, so I definitely have to watch my clock. So yeah, let's dig in. So Dr. Wheeler, we talked about the chiropractor's role last time. We're going to get it into a little more of kind of the strategies you use to maybe get that healing going. So once a concussion is diagnosed, talk to me about natural recovery. How does that support fit into your care?
Yeah, I think a lot of the most effective strategies for concussion are natural strategies. And whether that's myself or neurologist, kind of the headlines for recovery are more natural strategies. So I've made a list. I've got 9 things that you can look at and 9 things you can do to help recover from a concussion quicker. And these are kind of picking up after you've been diagnosed. So okay. You've had a head injury, whether that's a car accident, sports injury, fall. We've gotten past that phase where you've been diagnosed. You definitely know you have a concussion. This is kind of what we're picking up here. And so I'll go and jump right into it. So the first thing on the list is rest, and take a few days, plan to take a day or two off work. Old school thinking was that they called it cocooning, where you would sit in a room for 7-8 days completely in the dark. That's not really what I mean with rest. I want you doing things. I want you to take a little time off something that's going to be mentally or physically straining. And so, yeah, plan to take 24 or 48 hours off school or work. Number 2, make sure you sleep. One that people think about a lot with concussion, and the old school thought process was that you don't sleep, at least at first. A lot of times I would say that you'd hear that. I got to make sure that we wake them up every few hours.
Right, yeah. Talk about that.
That's actually a lot more modern research has shown that that's not fully true, but there is some truth in where it stems from. And so if you've had a concussion, during the day, you do want to watch your family member, your friend pretty closely for those first 5-6 hours, because that's when those concussion symptoms, TBI symptoms are going to start presenting. So if this is like a late night injury, this happened right before bed, you do want to stay up a couple hours just to make sure that those initial symptoms aren't getting worse. Mm-hmm. That's when things that are more severe, if it's something a little worse than a concussion, like a brain bleed, those symptoms are going to start picking up those first couple hours. But if you're past that 5-6 hour window, you're actually encouraged to go to sleep. That's how your brain's going to start healing. Rest is going to be really, really important for that concussion to speed up. So it's not true that you have to stay up for 24 hours, but you do want to watch them pretty close for those first couple hours after the concussion. I'm
glad you dove into the sleep and rest, because sleep and rest are 2 completely different things, right? And you were talking about rest. That's just, taking a step back from activities. You mentioned just a short period of that on our previous episode. Again, audience, if you didn't listen to that, please go do that after this one. That's brief, though. You do want to get back to like a measured amount of activity pretty soon after that. Yeah. But then there's sleep, right? That's like delta wave sleep. You're talking about, you're getting into the lymphatic system where you're clearing out all the trash that builds up in your brain over a course of the day, correct? Those are 2 completely different things we're talking about, yeah? Rest and sleep.
Rest meaning I don't want you going back out on the football field, right? But I want you to take some time off from intensive activity, but you still need to be sleeping too. You need to do both. Rest and sleep are important for those first couple of days. But you just touched on number 3, right as we were right at the end there, which is super important, is get back to some activity. I don't want you out there running a marathon 24 hours after, but light walking as soon as 24 hours after is really important for recovery. Mm-hmm. When we're thinking concussion, we're thinking energy is gone, the metabolism is all out of whack. So you want to start encouraging some blood flow back up to the brain. And so that light cardio, light exercise, like an exercise bike, that's really going to help speed up that recovery.
That's very important. And then when you start talking about activity and people, athletes, myself, I like to go to the gym. You've got to consider, your nutrition, your protein, your glucose levels. Those are important parts of maintaining a healthy body. But when you're talking about brain injury recovery, that adds a whole different dimension, right? So talk about the roles of those things in concussion symptoms and recovery.
Yeah, so we'll jump to number 4. Glucose, sugar. You do need it. You don't want too much, and you don't want the wrong type of sugar. And so one of the biggest things after concussion is you're not getting glucose to the brain like before. All your ATP has been used up all at once. There's less blood flow, there's less oxygen, but sugar becomes a very important part of recovery. You need ATP to heal. You need all glycolysis to be running its tracks. And so make sure you do get some sugar, but you want it from really good sources like fruits. You don't want to be going in a lot of processed high fructose corn syrups, white sugars, processed carbohydrates, because your body's going to have to spend energy to break those down and even use them in the first place. Not to mention they're very inflammatory, and that's not something you want to throw in the mix when you're already inflamed after a concussion. And same deal, you want some protein. These are the building blocks that you're going to be rebuilding and repairing the neurons, and then you want fat too. Ideally, you're getting more omega-3s versus omega-6s. And omega-3s are your fish oils. There's a lot of omega-3s that are accessible in things like walnuts, and we've actually got a list we give patients of some good omega-3 based options. And I'd be happy to send that to you if we want to attach that for listeners. And then you want to make sure you get a lot more omega-3s and a lot less omega-6, because omega-6 is going to be a little more inflammatory. The omega-3s are also really important for rebuilding the myelin sheaths and rebuilding the neurons themselves. So yeah, super important. And on diet, those are some things you want to include. We'll move to number 5, which is, and that was number 4. I don't know if I said that. Number 5 on the list is avoid alcohol and caffeine. I think it's anybody's instinct to have a head injury and go chug a few IPAs. But if it's on your agenda for the day, that's one of the worst things you can do, because it's
don't do it. Okay.
If a brewery is encouraging it, you find a new bar there. That's not your spot, unless they have a neurologist that happens to work there. Maybe
it's a nice bar.
Yeah, this is in Midtown Atlanta. This is somewhere nice. But yeah, you want to make sure you avoid alcohol, because it's going to really hurt your sleep, which is we just talked about, one of the most important things. It's going to dehydrate you. And same with caffeine. We're talking about sleep cycles. Caffeine's a little bit less harsh as an inflammatory issue, but it's going to be a problem because you're getting dehydrated and your sleep cycle's already going to be a little funny post-concussion. So you don't want to introduce that in the mix either.
Makes sense. People may have a tough time with the caffeine. It's a go-to for so many people, right? It makes you feel better, right? Especially when you're feeling run down, which you completely are after a TBI or concussion. You're not feeling very well, and you think, well, hey, the caffeine typically gets me going, right? So not a good idea, huh?
Not to mention it can relieve headaches. A lot of times, migraine patients, that's one of the main things that they help that helps us is caffeine. But at least for those first 24, 48 hours, you can, even that first week, it's a good idea to limit it. Okay. You can introduce it back in slowly, but alcohol, it's a good idea to avoid for at least a week or two after. That's hard for people too. It's number 6. So we can talk about some of those supplements. And we mentioned that in the last podcast, some of the things that really speed up concussion recovery. Omega-3s, we just touched on those a little bit. The reason omega-3s are really important, they calm down inflammation. You don't want to inflame the brain any further. It's already inflamed. It's already not working 100%. It can help stabilize cell membranes and help rebuild that myelin sheath like we talked about, that's the coating on the neuron that sends the signals and sends the nerve signals. And then omega-3s can also increase BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is really important for brain recovery. So a couple good reasons to take omega-3s. Vitamin D is really important for inflammation, neuroplasticity. And then magnesium is another really important one. There's a lot of different forms of magnesium. You can go to Amazon and buy 10 different versions of magnesium. But for the brain, there's one called magnesium threonate. And that one is the most available to cross the blood-brain barrier because it looks somewhat like glucose, and the brain's actually able to take that version of magnesium in pretty readily. And so that's a special magnesium. We have that one in stock. And usually if we've got somebody with shown concussion symptoms, we'll give them a kind of a care package with all these options: magnesium threonate, omega-3s, vitamin Ds, and then B vitamins. That's the one I didn't mention. So 4 supplements. You can take a lot more than that, but those are the 4 we kind of narrow it down to. B vitamins, especially B12, help nerve production and neuron repair. But I'd say out of all of those, magnesium threonate's probably the most effective, and they notice the biggest difference.
That's good to know. Yeah, it's a lot of talk these days about supplements, and you mentioned there's so many sources and so many varieties and pharmaceutical companies and dosages. So it sounds like you guys have a kind of the formula worked out. Appreciate your mention of the magnesium threonate to being the one that gets through that blood-brain barrier the easiest. So definitely optimal there. So.
Yeah, and that's just something you don't think about. You're not even, okay, I give you a list of supplements. You're just going to go purchase probably the most expensive version of it.
Mm-hmm. Very helpful. I know one thing, you're talking about things that are hard to give up, caffeine and all that. What about screen time? You hear so much about screen time and concussions. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so that's number 7 on our list here. And screen time, there's a couple factors. I think main thing being is you want to be up doing pretty normal day-to-day stuff that next day after the concussion. And it's pretty easy. You're not feeling good. You're fatigued. You're dizzy. You've got a headache to just binge on the phone and sit there in the dark for a couple hours. For that reason, it's going to affect your rest. There's tons of studies about phone usage, especially late at night, affecting your sleep patterns and your sleep cycle anyway. And I'm not saying you can't use your phone during the day, but you want to limit it. And then 2, I don't think there's a ton of research on this yet as far as the impact on concussion, but when you're bent over in this position, and I know it definitely affects our patients with neck pain, upper back pain, and headaches, but you're restricting blood flow. You're compressing down on those vertebral arteries. And so when we look at that there, if you're bending your neck down on a screen, you're going to restrict that blood to the brain. So I think that's a factor too. But again, that one doesn't have any particular study on it. It's just something I've noticed. I feel like the more we do this, the less we're getting and the more tension it's creating, and you want to run into the brain.
You're talking about anatomy, and that makes sense. So I'll be curious to see what things look like in another 20, 30 years of us, full generation of people, with their chins tucked to their chest 50% of the day. So we'll see how that goes.
We already see it, we're at enough time, especially like cervical x-rays of young 18, 19-year-olds. If we end up shooting those, they don't have curves in their neck anymore. I mean, and usually you would see that in 40 or 50-year-olds, but now, because we're doing this all day, the necks are straight. There's early arthritis starting. It's wild. So it will have an impact. We're not meant to do that.
Right.
To number 8 on the list. So get some sunshine, and this goes hand in hand with getting some exercise, getting some light, just movement happening. But 2, sunshine's really important for that vitamin D we talked about, because if you're outside, it actually helps you convert some of that vitamin D you've been taking into a usable form where you can access it and help speed up that concussion recovery. Very good.
You've given us a nice list here, right? Besides, the related neck back pain that may go along with concussion, wrap it with how does the chiro care actually speed up that or help that TBI recovery?
The main thing on that is trying to get blood flow moving again. Again, we talked on that model. All the arteries that run through your neck there, if there's restriction, if there's inflammation, and there probably is, if you've fallen or done something that's impactful enough to give you a concussion or a TBI, you've probably affected the neck too. And so we want to make sure we open up some of that tension that may be around the occiput at the top of your head and get that blood moving, because we need glucose and oxygen going to the brain to heal it. And then 2, just really making sure that you're feeling 100% through that recovery and addressing those other symptoms that may go alongside the concussion.
Absolutely. And those are, I think, very actionable, easy to approach tips. If you were telling somebody and they said, just give me your 1 or 2 top strategies for, biggest bang for the buck, what would they be?
Make sure you're sleeping. That's probably the most important. After that first 5 or 6 hour window, make sure you get some rest. Get up and move a little bit. Try and get out and do a walk, as long as vertigo and dizziness aren't a major factor, because you do want to factor that in. If you're stumbling around, don't try and hop on an exercise bike right away.
Right.
Ease into that. Find something that's not going to make you fall again. And then 2, really look at taking some of those supplements, especially that magnesium threonate, vitamin D. Those can really help speed up recovery.
So I think that kind of brings me to a place. We're up against time. I think because we talked so much about the natural strategies and some of the other great tips you gave, you've been in practice for a while. You've seen a lot of patients who have chosen to follow particular recommendations. Maybe some didn't. What's the difference between someone who follows these natural strategies versus somebody who may not, in terms of recovery time and just long-term brain health?
Yeah, I think a few of these things on this list are vital, to really think about in that first day or two after the concussion. If you go out, like we said, if you start drinking, if you're dehydrated, if you're not resting, if you're not following some of these actionable steps and the exercise too, it can make your concussion last a lot longer, and the symptoms, and that's when we get into the conversation of you'll never be able to prove what it would have been otherwise, but we do know that the people that follow these protocols have a lot quicker recovery time versus somebody who's months out still dealing with vertigo symptoms, dizziness. This can prevent those long-term post-concussion type symptoms, and at least you're throwing every resource to prevent that from happening.
And I would add in, so many people glom onto any and every experimental treatment they can get their hands on, but the ones specifically, these are harmless, easy to approach, fairly cost effective. So what's it going to hurt, right? I mean, you might as well give yourself the best chance to get better more quickly, more effectively. 100% agree. Dr. Wheeler, is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with before we sign out for today?
No, just same thing. Have these conversations, share these videos and these tips with your friends, and just it's a conversation about head injuries and how they're a little more impactful than a lot of people realize, and they can be much more significant, life-changing events than a lot of people think about.
Education and awareness, what it's all about. Thank you for that, Dr. Wheeler. We appreciate it. Well, everybody, that is going to do it for another great episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. I want to once again thank our friend, Dr. Joshua Wheeler, for sharing his expertise, especially on prevention and navigating the legal and insurance aspects of injury recovery. For those interested, you can reach Dr. Wheeler and his dedicated team at Lookout Valley Chiropractic, and that's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Or again, find them at lookoutvalleychiro.com on the internet to learn more about their services that they offer. I hope you found this conversation insightful and empowering, and as you continue to navigate the challenges of head and bodily injuries. So please remember, like, subscribe, and leave us a comment to share your thoughts on today's episode. And before we go, got to remind you, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999. Take care. Join us next time for Mind Matters.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.